My name is Louis Jarvis, and this is going to be my presentation on my research into the geography of private land use in the Stennis acoustical buffer zone. The Stennis acoustical buffer zone, or simply buffer zone for short, is the 125,000 acre area surrounding the Stennis testing facility, or fee area, which is what it is officially known as. This area was acquired by NASA in the 1960s during the creation of their Stennis Space Center, which is where NASA has tested its rockets and where other private companies and government agencies conduct research and training, which could not be performed without an area around it which is devoid of permanent human presence. And it is also surrounded by a large percentage of tree cover due to the potentially dangerous sonic frequencies which rocket testing produces, as well as risk of explosions at the site, hazardous materials which are contained there, and live fire exercises conducted by the U.S. military. In addition, there are naval intelligence and NASA facilities containing classified information. Therefore, security at the site is very high and must be for the surrounding area. This is a map I made showing the parcels of land which are within the buffer zone and privately owned. I did this by going to the Hancock County Tax Assessor's website and locating their files on tax parcel data for the year 2023. I then found where it overlapped with the Stennis buffer zone using a map provided by NASA, and then went through the owners of these parcels and removed any that were owned by a government agency or a public land. This left me with the land in orange being the privately owned land within the buffer zone. Although the buffer zone extends into Pearl River County in Louisiana to the north and west of the test site, the land in Pearl River County is composed of the Picayune Municipal Airport, and the land in Louisiana is owned by the state of Louisiana, as it is all within the Bogachita National Wildlife Refuge. This leaves a sort of half donut shape with the fee area in the middle of the buffer zone, and the areas outside of Hancock County also being publicly owned. As you can see, the private land in the buffer zone composes a large part of Hancock County and is crisscrossed by several roads and highways, including Interstate 10. Unfortunately, the fee area and buffer zone were not empty before the 1960s. 5 towns existed within the buffer zone, which were Logtown, Westonia, Napoleon, Santa Rosa, and Gainesville. All land in the fee area was purchased outright by the federal government. However, landowners in the buffer zone had the ability to decide between selling an easement to the government and maintaining full ownership of their property, or they could fully sell their land to the government. During the construction of the test site, all buildings within the buffer zone and fee area were demolished, such as the town of Logtown, which is in this photograph. The woman lowering the flag had worked at the post office as the postmaster for 36 years, and whenever the test site came, her and all the other residents had to leave. The only sign that these buildings and towns existed, for the most part, are building foundations and cemeteries. This is a map of NASA's Byway to Space network. There are several byways which go through the buffer zone, and many are named after these extinct towns as a way of memorializing them by NASA. This is a map I created showing the historic locations of these towns and cemeteries, which are depicted with the extinct towns as black dots and the cemeteries as white squares. The land which is within the buffer zone and private property is in tan, and Hancock County is the green surrounding it. Many of these ruins are on publicly owned land, such as Gainesville. However, some are on private land which was never purchased by the government. These parcels contain ruins of buildings, especially their foundations, which were destroyed during the creation of the test site, as well as grave sites, which still have headstones but have otherwise been completely overtaken by vegetation. Many of these towns and cemeteries are located near major roadways. However, they are inaccessible due to the vegetation overgrowing and the roads leading to them having been destroyed. There are likely many more ruins in the buffer zone which do not have any record of, such as homes and churches which were not located in these towns, which were nevertheless destroyed and are inaccessible as well due to not having any driveways or roads leading to them and also being overrun by vegetation. What kind of land is the Stennis buffer zone? To find this out, I conducted a land cover analysis using data I collected from the National Land Cover Database, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the Hancock County Tax Assessor. I overlaid the tax parcel data onto data about what type of land this was, and while the map is not very easy to read, I created a chart showing the data collected from it by percentage of type of land cover. You can see a few trends from this map though. The light blue and dark green which dominate are woody wetlands and evergreen forest. This is almost all pine plantations or otherwise overgrown pine forests. And there are some spotches of barren land located near rivers. These are the sand mines, and the yellow rectangles are land parcels which have been dedicated to the farming of hay or sod. This is the chart that was produced by processing the data from the map. The four largest types of land are woody wetlands, evergreen forest, shrub, scrub, and herbaceous. These compose about 90% of all land within the buffer zone, and all of these are basically different types and stages of pine plantation for the most part. The woody wetlands is pine plantation, which is on low-lying land, which often floods or is muddy. Evergreen forest is pine plantation on slightly higher elevation land, so it is drier. The shrub scrub land is, for the most part, recently harvested timber, so the saplings and bushes surrounding it are low. There's not a high canopy, but it is low and considered shrub. And herbaceous is mostly just more recently harvested timber. The next category is hay pasture. This is the hay and sod farms, which are entirely located in the north part of the buffer zone where the elevation is higher. And then there is emergent herbaceous wetlands, which is otherwise not very usable wetlands, and it is covered in grasses and has very low elevation, lots of mud and water. Next is developed open space and barren land. This is due in a large part to sand and gravel mines, which produce barren land covered in sand and gravel, and open space which has been developed, but due to the building restrictions in the buffer zone, does not have any built up area. The rest of the land types are either at 0% or otherwise so small it is irrelevant to the data. This is a map depicting the elevation and waterways of land within the buffer zone, which is using data from the Gulf of Mexico Coastal Ocean Observing System. This is a bathymetry map down to 10-meter resolution of the elevation, with the high point in the northeast being 29 meters and the low point towards the southwest being 2 meters. Much of the land is around 10 meters, only a little bit of the land up north gets up in the 20s, but most is at or below 10 meters. It's lots of low-lying land, especially near the many waterways that cut across it. These waterways dominate the area. Their wetlands surrounding them compose much of the privately owned land, as NASA wanted lots of the higher land for putting their buildings on. These main waterways are the Pearl River to the west, the Jordan River to the northeast, Bayou LaCroix to the southeast, and the canal system, which is in the center of the map and is the sort of strange artificial looking waterways. But the canal system is all within the public land and is not accessible to the public. So what is this land used for? Land in the buffer zone is dominated by pine plantations, and these pine plantations are owned, though the majority of the acreage is owned by Weyerhaeuser Co., Soterra Inc., and the Illinois Municipal Fund. These companies alone own large parts of Hancock County, and many other private landowners and smaller companies own smaller parcels of land which are all used for timber, mostly growing slash and loblolly pine. These timber farms are identifiable from the satellite imagery for their rows of trees and the relative evenness of them being spaced apart, which does not occur in naturally growing forest. And these areas compose a vast majority of land cover within the buffer zone. Another common resource which can be found in the area are sand and gravel mines. These are identifiable due to the odd shade ponds that are created because of the need to wash the sand and gravel before it can be used. This results in these odd blue-green colors and the surrounding areas being barren land, which was seen in the land cover chart. This land is heavily used by machinery and trucks and is covered in residual sand and gravel, which leads to it being barren. And the ponds are toxic to wildlife and vegetation, so they cannot be dumped into natural waterways. They have to simply be left. And as you can see over time, towards the left are newer mines, and towards the right are older ones. These mines are owned by Wet Mine Assets Holding, LLC. However, there are many other mines similar to these throughout the area, and they are mostly located near waterways. These are located near the Pearl River. Other ones are found further south, and there are other ones as well near the Jordan River. These total to about 20 parcels dedicated to mining non-metallic minerals using water-intensive methods, which is the official name for these types of mines. Another common sight, especially when driving through the buffer zone, are beehives. Beehives require large areas with relatively few people and lots of vegetation, and the buffer zone is perfect for this. The Mississippi Department of Transportation lists beehives as a resource which could also be taken more advantage of. There could easily be more, and it seems to be a growing industry of sorts in the buffer zone. As previously mentioned, towards the north, where there is higher elevation, there tends to be more parcels dedicated to the farming of hay or sod. They look similar to this one, which is found towards the north of the buffer zone, and they do not contain any sheds or buildings, but they are completely cut or barren due to the hay or sod being harvested. The final way that this land is used is for restoration. while many of the publicly owned land is being restored by places such as the Crosby Arboretum, which is an extension of Mississippi State, or the federal and state governments. There is also private land which is being restored. A company called Wetland Solutions owns some land, and they are restoring what, when they bought, was loblolly and slash pine plantations into what would have been the natural landscape of the area, which is longleaf pine savanna and bogs. The image is taken from the Crosby Arboretum, which is not within the buffer zone but is less than a mile away from it and is composed of a similar type of land. And the Wetland Solutions owned areas and other private landowners have recently begun attempting to restore these landscapes to their more natural state, which is these longleaf pines, which require semi-annual prescribed burns, and this clears the landscape and leads to there being a much more biodiverse area, which can contain many at-risk or endangered species such as gopher tortoises and what are pictured here, which are pitcher plants, which are carnivorous plants which thrive in the Crosby Arboretum and which can be found in many low-lying areas which are not suitable for pine plantations within the buffer zone. And these landowners and Wetland Solutions are trying to restore much of this land type and habitat for many species.